Friends, I am Dr. K.D. Mishra and I will take lectures on human physiology. Well, I am aware that all of you have reached here through a very tough competitive exam, the NEET, and you are very familiar with human physiology and anatomy. But since now you are going to become a perfect physician, a good doctor, you need to understand the conditions which causes disease. The disturbances in a constant body environment can cause disease. For that, what are the parameters which should be studied and which should be analyzed? And then, for reaching on certain conclusion on the root cause of disease, you must understand the basic principles of physiology. Now, as you know, the human body is made up of near about 100 trillion cells of different types. All these cells forms tissue, and tissues form organs, then organ systems, and all these functions in a coordinated manner to perform at optimum level to maintain good health. Each cell and organ contributes its share to maintain the homeostatic condition and provide autonomicity to the body. A moderate dysfunction in any of the conditions, in any of the parameters, can cause sickness, or an extreme dysfunction may lead to even death. Now, the cells are the basic units of living beings. All the activities are conducted at the level of cells. Near about 200 types of cells are there in the body which perform different functions. But then these cells have something in common. You know, the human body is formed from a single cell through embryogenesis, and all the cells have similar genetic material, but they perform different functions as they form different tissue and different organs. But all the cells have some similarities. All the cells uses oxygen for combustion of nutrients to produce energy. All the cells uses glucose for production of energy. All the cells are present in an extracellular environment which is similar throughout the body. Majority of the cells have got a capacity to reproduce. But you know, some of the cells, when they become mature, they loses their capacity to reproduce. Such as the nerve cells, after maturation, they do not divide any further. Muscle cells also, they rarely divide. But there are certain cells, there are certain tissue which needs to be replaced time to time. Say, for example, the epidermal cells of the skin are to be replaced regularly. The cells of the liver, if they are damaged, they have the capacity of reproduction. They can replace the damaged cells. But the best example is the RBC. The RBC have got a limited lifespan of 120 days. That's 4 months, after which its membrane becomes brittle and they are destroyed. So, millions of RBCs are to be replaced daily. In an average adult, 60% is the water content by weight and 40% other materials. Other materials includes 80% of protein and protein derivatives, 7% minerals and 15% fat. The 60% of water forms fluid. That means various materials are present in that fluid in solution. It is divided into two. One is intracellular fluid, which is present inside the cells, and another is extracellular fluid, which is present outside the cells or in between the cells. The ICF contributes 40%, it contributes major share, whereas the ECF contributes only 20% of the body weight. In a person of 70 kg, 42 liters of water is present, out of which 28 liters inside the cells, that is intracellular fluid, and 14 liters present outside the cells as ECF. Now all the cells of our body, they are, as I mentioned earlier, are present in a fluid medium. We call it internal C or the extracellular fluid, which is enclosed within our skin, that is integument. All the cells live essentially in a similar extracellular fluid, that is similar environment, which is called as milieu interior by Claude Bernard. The ECF is further divided into two. One, the fluid which is present around the cells, in between the cells, we call it interstitial fluid, and the fluid which is present in blood plasma. Now, apart from these two compartments, there is a compartment called lymph. The blood is supplied to different organs through a capillary network where filtration of blood takes place and interstitial fluid is formed. That interstitial fluid is collected in the form of lymph, and that lymph is filtered many times and it is sent back to the main blood circulatory system so as to maintain the volume of blood to the normal values, which is 5 to 6 liters. The ECF constitutes 20% of the body weight, in which 15% is interstitial fluid and only 5% is blood plasma. Any disturbance in this, any inappropriate compartmentalization in this situation, that means if the interstitial fluid is increased and it is not collected properly and sent back to the main blood circulatory system, then it will be accumulated in that part of the body, especially legs. It is called edema. Edema means fluid-filled swelling in a part of the body. Now the intracellular fluid versus extracellular fluid. There is a considerable difference between the intracellular fluid and extracellular fluid. The extracellular fluid contains large amount of sodium, chloride, bicarbonates, the nutrients, the respiratory gases and all that, whereas the ICF is significantly different from it. It contains large amount of potassium, magnesium and phosphate as compared to ECF, in which large amount of sodium, chloride and bicarbonates is there. This difference is necessary for maintenance of the nature, the biological nature of the cell membranes, and to permit the movement of materials across the cell membrane. Now here you can see some of the parameters and their values. As we have seen already, the sodium is more in case of ECF, and it is almost very less in case of ICF. Potassium is less in ECF, it is more in ICF. Chloride is more in ECF, it's less in ICF. Bicarbonates are more in ECF and almost half in the ICF. Phosphate is less in ECF and it is quite high in the ICF. So there is a difference in these values. Now edema, as I just explained, that edema is a condition in which the fluid is filled in a body part. It can occur due to two reasons. Either the filtration of blood is more and collection of the fluid from the organs is less, or the collection through the lymphatic system is badly affected and the fluid is filled in the parts. Mostly it is seen in the legs or feet, ankles, all that. Now coming on to the various constituents, the water. Water is a wonderful molecule of living beings. It is an ideal solvent for physiological reactions. Water has a dipole moment. The oxygen pulls the electrons from the hydrogen atoms, and this allows water to dissolve a variety of atoms and molecules. The water molecule interact with other water molecules with hydrogen bonding. The hydrogen bond network in water allows for several key properties relevant in human physiology. One is water has a high surface tension, it has a high heat and vaporization heat capacity, and the water has a high dielectric constant. So therefore water forms the most suitable solvent for any living system. Another important parameter in physiology is the hydrogen ion concentration, commonly called as pH, the pH value. The pH value of water at 25 degrees centigrade is 7 when the hydrogen ion and oxygen ions are equal. So the value of pH comes 7. If the value of pH increased by 1 unit, that means increase in the hydrogen ion concentration 10 folds. Similarly, if the pH value decreases by 1 unit, it means decrease in hydrogen ion concentration by 10 folds. The plasma of healthy person has got a pH value of 7.4, which is slightly alkaline. But you know how important is the pH value, that only a fluctuation of 0.5 pH can cause damage to the physiological processes. Now, buffer system. A buffer system maintains the hydrogen ion concentration. Body pH is stabilized by the buffering capacity of body fluids, thus keeping the pH of the solution relatively constant despite of the addition of considerable quantities of acid and base. All the buffers in a homogeneous solution are in equilibrium, the same hydrogen ion. This is known as the isohydric principle. So, different body parts, in different body parts, for optimum functioning, pH value is very important. Say for example, if we take example of digestive system, in stomach, the pH value is about 3. It is highly acidic because the acid can convert pepsinogen into pepsin and the digestion of protein takes place there. But as soon as the food material passes onto the duodenum, the enzymes which are present in the duodenum, that is from the intestinal juice, that is Secus entericus, or from the pancreatic juice, all those enzymes work in an alkaline medium. So, the pH value has to be changed there. If it remains acidic, those enzymes will be inactivated. Now, a proper acid-base balance has to be maintained in body. If the pH is lowered than 7.35, this phenomena is called acidosis. Similarly, if the pH increases by 7.45, the phenomena is called alkalosis. Such changes impair the delivery of oxygen and the removal of carbon dioxide from the tissue. This disorder is called respiratory acidosis or respiratory alkalosis. Respiratory acidosis is often caused by respiratory failure or failure of ventilation, while respiratory alkalosis can be caused by alveolar hyperventilation and often found in the patients of chronic liver diseases. Non-respiratory disorders of pH that affects CO2 concentration are referred to as metabolic acidosis and metabolic alkalosis. Metabolic acidosis or alkalosis can be caused by the electrolyte disturbances, severe vomiting, diarrhea, ingestion of certain drugs, kidney diseases, and the diseases that affect the metabolism like diabetes. Now, homeostasis. Homeostasis is a phenomena by which a constant, stable physiological environment is maintained in the body. It can be defined as the maintenance of constancy in the internal environment of the body. This term was given by an American physiologist, Walter Cannon. All the tissue and organs of our body functions in such a way that they help to maintain the constant internal environment, such as maintenance of body temperature, maintenance of pH, maintenance of amount of oxygen, ionic concentration, and maintenance of nutrients in the body. Now, the functions of the cells and tissues are integrated with the help of certain control systems like nervous system, the hormonal system of endocrine glands. It is combinedly called as neuroendocrine system, to maintain homeostasis and to maintain good health. Disease is often considered as a state of disruption of homeostasis. Each and every functional system of the body contributes to the homeostasis. You know that the digestive system, if the digestive system helps to maintain the nutrient level in the body, especially that of glucose. The respiratory system is responsible for supplying oxygen to different parts of the body and for elimination of carbon dioxide from the tissue. Similarly, kidney is responsible for two vital functions. One is the maintenance of water content in the body, called osmoregulation. And second is the electrolyte balance. So each and every system of the body is doing its share to maintain constant conditions in the body, which is required for maintaining good health. Now, the role of circulatory system. The basic function of circulatory system is the transport of material. The nutrients are transported to different parts of the body from alimentary canal. The oxygen and carbon dioxide are transported by the blood. The hormones are transported by the blood. So this helps to maintain the homogeneity of extracellular fluid throughout the body. Now, regulatory systems. Now, just to maintain the best possible and optimum conditions in the different parameters, there are certain regulatory systems in our body which functions to regulate all these parameters. One is the nervous system and another is the endocrine system. Jointly we call it neuroendocrine system. The nervous system regulates the muscular activity and the secretory activity of different glands, and the hormonal system regulates all the metabolic functions. Now, the nervous system has got three components. One is the sensory input, another is central nervous system, which integrates the sensory and motor output. When some stimulus is sent to the central nervous system regarding variation in a parameter, then central nervous system decides and analyzes it and sends a output to the concerning organ for the control of that function. Sensory receptors detect the state of the body and the surroundings and sends the input to CNS. The CNS include brain and spinal cord. The information is sent to CNS, it is analyzed, it determines the reaction to be performed by the body organs, and the response is sent. Accordingly, appropriate signals are sent to the concerning body part, and the function is done there. Another component of the nervous system is the autonomic nervous system, which functions below our consciousness. It controls almost all the vital organs of the body, like heart. The autonomic nervous system has two components. One is the sympathetic nervous system and another is parasympathetic nervous system. The sympathetic nervous system prepares the body for emergencies. The level of glucose is increased, respiratory rate is increased so as to cope up with the emergency situations, whereas the parasympathetic nervous system functions as a peacemaker. It brings back the parameters to the normal level, and functioning of both these components of the nervous system, autonomic nervous system, are essential for maintenance of normal life. An endocrine system is made up of different endocrine glands. The major endocrine glands are the pituitary, the thyroid, parathyroid, adrenal, thymus, penis gland, and the reproductive organs like ovary and testis also secrete certain hormones. These are ductless glands and they secrete hormones which are transported through the bloodstream. So the extracellular fluid has got certain level of hormones which stimulates or suppresses activity of particular type of cell, which are the target cells of that particular hormone. The skin and its derivatives like hairs and nails forms the integumentary system of our body, which includes the skin glands also. It is the largest organ of human body, forming about 12 to 15% of body weight. The skin serves as the first and frontline defense. It prevents the invasion of pathogens into the body. Also, the skin has got millions of sense organs which sense the stimuli from the external environment, and accordingly the life is saved from such as extreme heat, acids or electric current or something that. Now here you can see how the skin performs an important function of thermoregulation. You know, when there is extreme hot conditions, the message is sent to the thermostat, which is situated in the hypothalamus of brain, and from there a message is sent to the sweat glands, where vasodilation occurs in the skin arteries and large amount of sweat is formed. That sweat, when comes onto the surface of body, due to evaporative cooling, the body gets cooled, and thus the temperature of the body is maintained. On the other hand, when there is a cold atmosphere outside and that cold blood is supplied to the hypothalamus, the thermostat triggers a mechanism by which the sympathetic nervous system increases contraction in the smooth muscles as well as the skeletal muscles. Sometimes it initiates shivering, producing the heat. At the same time, the arteries of skin are constricted, vasoconstriction occurs there, and less amount of sweat is formed to prevent any heat loss from the body. Now, a very important system for saving the life is the immune system. The immune system comprises of white blood cells and lymphatic system, which includes, you can see in this picture, which includes the lymph nodes in the body. There are lymph nodes, cervical lymph nodes here. There are auxiliary lymph nodes here. There are inguinal lymph nodes between the two legs. So, when the interstitial fluid is collected in terms of lymph, it passes through a series of lymph nodes which contain reticuloendothelial cells where the pathogens like bacteria, viruses are filtered, they are phagocytized, they are digested, and only the infectionless lymph is sent back to the main bloodstream. It protects us from the pathogens like bacteria, fungi, and parasites. The immune system functions to develop defense mechanism in two ways. One is by distinguishing the healthy cells and the cells which are affected, which are diseased, and the pathogens which enter into the body, so that they can destroy only the cells which are damaged or the pathogens which have entered in our body, and they are removed by phagocytosis and digested there, or production of antibodies is there which destroys or neutralizes the pathogens. Now, reproductive system, the basic function of the reproductive system is to produce offsprings for continuity of life. But then continuity of life is also a process by which autonomicity of life is maintained. Now, control systems. No, to control all these parameters in optimum level, there are thousands of control systems in our body for maintenance of homeostasis. One is the genetic control system, which is present inside the cells as genetic material, and it controls the protein synthesis mainly. The nervous system controls the amount of carbon dioxide. It also controls the contraction in the muscles. The liver and pancreas regulates glucose concentration. The kidney regulates ionic concentration and osmoregulation. Tolerance limits. All these parameters should be in a perfect limit. But some of the parameters have got a very narrow tolerance limit beyond which it often causes illness or injury, and if a major dysfunction occurs, then it can even lead to death. There are certain examples of this. Increase in the normal body temperature from 98.4 degree Fahrenheit by 11 degree Fahrenheit, or from 37 degrees centigrade to 7 degrees more, it leads vicious cycle. That means the metabolic rate of the cells increases and the cells damages themselves. There is a damage of enzymes also. Increase or decrease in normal pH value from 7.4 by only 0.5 can lead to serious consequences like acidosis and alkalosis. Another example of tolerance limit is the decrease in potassium ion concentration, even by 1/3 of the normal value, can cause failure of nerve transmission and it can lead to paralysis. Alternately, if the potassium level concentration increases 2 to 3 times, the heart muscles are likely to depress. If the calcium level falls about 1/2 of the normal limit, then excess stimulation of the skeletal muscle occurs and that causes tetanic contraction. Tetanic contraction are the state of a continuous contraction where the muscle remains in a continuous state of contraction. It doesn't relax. And if it doesn't relax, then it will not contract any further. Fall in glucose concentration below 1/2 can causes mental irritability and it can even cause convulsions. Nature of control system. Homeostatic regulation is achieved by feedback mechanism. Now, what is this feedback mechanism? This is very important part from the aspect of understanding the physiology as well as from the aspect of examination. If there is a change in a variable, it is detected by a sensor, then it sends a message to a control system in the central nervous system. This feedback is analyzed in the nervous system and then a message is sent to the effector organ for correction of that parameter. So, if increase or decrease in a parameter causes a feedback, it is called as feedback mechanism. Now, the feedback mechanism, how it works. If there is a stimuli or there is a stress, then there is a change in variable, then the activation of feedback mechanism occurs, then it affects the response or inhibition or stimulation of that variable and the return to normal value, that is the establishment of homeostasis to maintain healthy conditions. Now, the feedback mechanism is of two types. One is negative feedback mechanism and another is positive feedback mechanism. The negative feedback mechanism is the mechanism by which if some parameter is increased to cope up with the change in a variable, then by increase of that, a feedback is generated that stops the stimulus which increases that parameter. This is called negative feedback mechanism. It works like this: change in a variable or disruption of homeostasis. It is detected by a receptor, then control center generates an output signal which is sent to the effector organ and there is a return of normal value, that is establishment of homeostatic condition. Here are certain examples of negative feedback mechanism. One is the amount of carbon dioxide. When the amount of carbon dioxide increases in blood, a signal is sent to the respiratory center which is located in the medulla oblongata. The inspiratory center stimulates contraction of muscles of diaphragm and intercostal muscles, which stimulates the process of inspiration. As soon as the inspiration starts, the ventilation starts, the amount of oxygen is reduced in the blood, and then the inspiratory center stops sending stimulus. So in this way, the amount of carbon dioxide is maintained. Next is another example of negative feedback. A very good example is the amount of glucose in blood. You know, when we take food and carbohydrates are digested, the carbohydrates are converted into glucose, and when this blood with large amount of glucose is sent to the pancreas secretes a hormone called insulin by the beta cells. Now this insulin reduces the amount of glucose in blood in two ways. One is by stimulating the body cells for using the glucose, and second, by converting glucose into glycogen, a process, a phenomena called as glycogenesis. Conversely, when the blood glucose level falls, say in case of fasting or after few hours of having food, when the glucose level falls down, then the blood, when with less amount of glucose is supplied to the pancreas, the alpha cells of pancreas secretes another hormone called glucagon. The glucagon in liver converts glycogen into glucose, thus the glucose level is maintained in the blood. Here is another example of feedback mechanism, that is maintenance of blood pressure. When the blood pressure increases, the message is sent to the brain, and the cardiac accelerator center is suppressed, and the vasomotor center is suppressed, and the blood pressure is lower to normal value. In other case, when the blood pressure is lower, then the cardiac center increases the heartbeat, and the vasomotor center also stimulated so as to increase the blood pressure, and thus the homeostatic condition of blood pressure is maintained. Here is a simple representation of thermoregulation. You know, in case of when the body temperature increases, lot of sweating occurs. When the body temperature increases, lot of sweating occurs. The evaporative cooling occurs and body temperature is maintained. And when there is cold condition, then the shivering occurs, the sweating decreases, and thus the body temperature is maintained to normal. Now, another feedback system is the positive feedback system. In this, if some parameter is increased, then it causes further increase in that parameter till the maximum effort is achieved. Most of the time, the positive feedback leads to instability instead of stability, and sometimes can cause death. You know, most of the control system of the body are governed by negative feedback system. Say for example, if a person meets an accident and loses 2 liters of blood, you know, one person has got 5 to 6 liters of blood. if he loses 2 liters of blood, then the blood supplied to the heart is less, and it further accelerates the process till the heart stops functioning and it leads to death. In another example, if we take that if the person loses only 1 liter of blood out of 5 to 6 liters, then a negative feedback system works and the volume of blood is maintained so as to recover from that situation. But there are certain examples where the positive feedback mechanism has a useful effect. One of the example is the clotting of blood. As soon as a blood vessel is ruptured, a clotting mechanism is initiated. And you know that there are 13 clotting factors which works as a cascade. One stimulates the other till the complete clotting occurs and blood vessel is plugged to prevent hemorrhage. So this is one of the positive effects of useful positive feedback mechanism. Second one, and a good example of positive feedback is during the parturition, that is during childbirth. When head of the baby is pushed against the cervix of female, it stimulates, it triggers a mechanism and a message is sent to the posterior pituitary, the neurohypophysis, from where oxytocin is released, and that increases further contraction in the uterine muscles till the baby is born. Here is the picture representing this positive feedback mechanism of childbirth. The oxytocin stimulates the uterine contraction and pushes the baby towards the cervix. The head of the baby pushes against the cervix. They send nerve impulses to the brain, and from brain, the pituitary, the neurohypophysis secretes more oxytocin till the childbirth takes place. Another example is the action potential in the nerve fiber. When a nerve fiber is stimulated, the sodium gates present in the nerve membrane, they opens and sodium is pushed inside the membrane and potassium is thrown outside the membrane. So this generates an action potential in the nerve fiber, and then this further stimulates the adjoining areas of the nerve fiber where the sodium gates opens and there is an inrush of sodium inside the nerve fiber till the impulse reaches to the end of the fiber. The same thing you can see here in this picture. Here the sodium enters inside the membrane and the potassium is thrown out. So this generates a positive weak current of plus 40 millivolts, and a wave of transmission is conducted to the next portion where the inrush of sodium occurs. Let us see in another picture here. This is Hodgkin's cycle of depolarization of nerve fiber. The same thing is depicted in a different way. If there is a threshold of depolarization, threshold means the nerve fiber works in all or none law. If the threshold is up to the mark, then the sodium gates will open and that will generate an action potential. Opening of sodium gates, then further opening of sodium gates, then rapid rise in membrane potential and depolarization occurs. Then what happens? After that, the sodium-potassium pump works and the nerve membrane is brought back to the resting potential. Now, adaptive control system. An adaptive control system sometimes works when a quick response is needed. In an emergency, when a quick response is needed, the response is observed without information to the central nervous system, but then when the event is happening, the information is sent to the central nervous system, and for future, the central nervous system decides and analyzes the perfect stimulus needed to cope up with that situation. And when such a situation arises next time, then the perfect stimulus is observed. This phenomena is called adaptive control, and in a sense, it is a delayed negative feedback. Now, intracellular homeostasis. Until now, we were discussing the homeostatic processes occurring outside the cells, that is in interstitial fluid or ECF. Now, we can see that each and every cell also has got a phenomena of maintaining homeostatic condition inside the intracellular environment. The main objective is the providing optimum environment for the cell and tissue functions. Temperature is regulated, pH is regulated, sodium and potassium ions are regulated. The values of the enzymatic activities and cell metabolism are maintained. Hence, homeostasis can only be achieved by the coordinated and balanced interaction between intracellular and extracellular environment of the body. Thanks, friends. Next time, we will discuss other topics on physiology. Thank you.